If there's one thing I've really grown to appreciate, having grown up Catholic, born into a Catholic family, and I mean this in all sincerity, folks, there is nothing more annoying to a cradle Catholic than a convert. Now, before some of you get up and walk out, let me at least clarify. I mean that in the most positive sense, okay, if you can imagine. But think about it. When a person learns, say, English as a second language, they appreciate the grammar of English more than a native English speaker, or any other language for that matter. They tend to enjoy grammar more than those of us who grew up with the language. Or when you consider patriotism in the U.S., knowledge or appreciation for what we are about as a nation, sometimes people who are immigrants to the country, going through the process of becoming citizens, what they learn about the nation and what drew them here, they tend to appreciate it perhaps a little more profoundly than those of us who grew up, which is why it's important to renew ourselves and your children in our history of the nation and the principles on which it was founded. In the same way, there are a lot of things we cradle Catholics grow up with that we take for granted, that those who come into the faith through the RCIA, or we now call it the OCIA, really have an enthusiasm that we may not have because they learn it as part of their process of entering into the faith, and perhaps learn more profoundly things that we take for granted, that we've always done, but really never knew the depth of it or the reasons. Perhaps some of us do. Which is why in many parishes, including here, it's important to take advantage of the opportunities for adult faith formation. That's why we say the OCIA is for anyone who wants to become Catholic, but also those who want to be renewed and learn more deeply elements of the Catholic faith. Deacon Tom has his apologetics class, which apologetics is explanations, helping us to grow deeper in that faith. Because there are lots of things we take for granted as cradle Catholics that we don't give too much thought. We do, but don't give as much thought perhaps as a convert. And sometimes when you see the enthusiasm that they have, it gives us pause every now and again. And I jokingly say, it can get a little annoying, that enthusiasm. But it's good to see, because where would this church be without the converts? At one point in all of our family history, the faith was introduced to our family. And we hope that 2,000 years of passing on the faith from one generation to the next does not end with us or with our children and our grandchildren, when you see the amount of people who often stray from the faith and leave, a very small percentage of which are people who are converts. You don't see as many converts leaving the Catholic faith as perhaps cradle Catholics. And we see that kind of annoyance and dynamic in today's gospel, a very familiar gospel about the workers in the vineyard, in which some are hired at the beginning of the day, others are hired throughout the course of the day. Then you have the people hired just as the sun was coming to setting and the workday was coming to an end, and yet they all reap the same rewards. But you look at the details as well. The very first group that the vineyard owner speaks to, it says they agreed to the daily wage. After agreeing with them for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. But every other group, starting with the second group, he says, you go into my vineyard and I will give you what is just. See the difference? The first group, he agreed to the wage. Everyone else, he says, I'll pay you what's just. And then he reminds that first group when they come last at the end, didn't you agree to the daily wage? He's holding them to what they promised. He's holding them to the agreement. But then asks the question, and there's where it might give us a little bit of pause for those who have been there the whole day. Are you envious because I'm generous? Don't I have a right to do with my own money as I see fit? And perhaps one line that perhaps could be overlooked is, he said, take what's yours and go. Let's hope he's not kicking him out. But go home, take your wage. But hopefully their objection isn't diminishing their status as full-day workers. But we see that dynamic tension between those who've been there all day and those who came at different times throughout the day. Just as some of us are cradle Catholics, we've been Catholic all our lives, and then there are those who come at different points of their own lives. And it's a real blessing that the work of evangelization and drawing people into our church is still alive and well, because of those who hear that faith by our example and other things that draw them to this faith, and those generous workers in the vineyard who help prepare them, for that wonderful night. Mostly it's at the Easter Vigil when they are brought into the church. So I thought it would be fun, rather than talk about overly profound themes. We've had enough of that the last few weeks. I got to tell you, I get a little tired hearing some of these Gospels. I decided to look up through Wikipedia, which I know is not the best resource. It's always a good place to start, and see who are some of the more famous converts to Catholicism. Now, I may go through the list, and some of you might say, well, what about Nicole Kidman? What about Mark Wahlberg? What about Alfred Hitchcock? All of them were Catholic, but they were lifelong Catholics. These are the converts that we see throughout history, and hopefully it's drawn from all areas of expertise and all areas of history and interest that we may have. For example, Hank Aaron. How many knew that Hank Aaron was a convert to the Catholic Church? Greg Abbott, the current and 48th governor of Texas, is a convert. John Adams, not President John Adams. Tricked you there. St. John Adams, a beatified person and a Catholic martyr, but happens to have the same name as our second president, who wasn't the best friend of the Catholic Church. Fanny Allen, daughter of Ethan Allen, who became a nun. Mother Mary Alfonsa, the daughter of Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author Nathaniel Hawthorne, converted to Catholicism, born Rose Hawthorne, and became a nun and the founder of St. Rose's Free Home for Incurable Cancer, a convert. St. Augustine, a convert at the age of 31. His mother was Catholic, but he didn't have his final conversion until much later. Johann Christian Bach, the youngest son of Johann Sebastian Bach, the great musical composer. Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of England, converted to Catholicism. Cherry Boone, the daughter of Pat Boone, is a Catholic convert. John Wilkes Booth. Okay, let's move on. Robert Bork. How many remember Robert Bork and his nomination to the Supreme Court in the 80s? I actually knew the pastor who brought him into the faith. I used to stay at the same parish when I stayed in Washington, D.C., and he shared with me that he quietly and without much grandiosity brought Robert Bork into the faith. G.K. Chesterton, the British writer, very popular writer, is a convert. Buffalo Bill Cody. How many knew that Buffalo Bill was a Catholic convert? Stephen Colbert. How many watch his show late at night? Not so late here as it might be on the West Coast, but Stephen Colbert is a Catholic convert. Tim Conway, the comedian. Gary Cooper, the man who played Lou Gehrig in the movie The Pride of the Yankees, he was a Catholic convert. And he said, he converted late in life saying, that decision I made was the right one. So he was happy to be converted to Catholicism. Lorenzo da Ponte, any of you who are familiar with Mozart's writings and Mozart's operas, Lorenzo da Ponte wrote many of the librettos that Mozart put to music. Dominique Dawes, an Olympic gold medalist. Christopher Dawson, a British independent scholar, wrote many books on cultural history. Dorothy Day, an advocate for the poor. Avery Dulles, the American Jesuit theologian. He became a cardinal under John Paul II, professor at Fordham University, and the son of Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. His son Avery Dulles became a Catholic, a Jesuit priest, and eventually, in his retirement, a cardinal. Faye Dunaway, the actress. Thomas Ewing, a U.S. senator and foster brother to General William Tecumseh Sherman, who himself was also Catholic, but the experiences of the war actually affected his own faith, but his son became a priest. Richard Gilmore, Bishop of the Diocese of Cleveland. Newt Gingrich. Graham Greene, a British writer. Wilton Daniel Gregory, Cardinal Gregory, current Archbishop of Washington, D.C., is a convert. Alec Guinness. For all you Star Wars fans, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a convert to Catholicism. And it gets better. There's another one down the line. Scott Hahn. Many of you have heard of Scott Hahn. He's a Catholic convert. Susan Hayward, Academy Award-winning actress. Dietrich von Hildebrand, a German theologian. Bob Hope, converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. His wife was a lifelong Catholic, but he became Catholic before he died. And of course, they asked him at one time, where would you like to be buried after you die? His answer was, and I quote, surprise me. Gerard Manley Hopkins, if you're familiar with his poetry, he was a convert. Tremendous poet who gave up his poetry when he entered the Jesuits as something that was vain, But then on one occasion, he was ordered to write a poem called The Wreck of the Deutschland in tribute to the nuns who were killed on the Deutschland when it sank, full of immigrants escaping Kaiser Germany. Dietrich von Hildebrand, I already mentioned him. E. Howard Hunt. How many remember that name from not so distant U.S. history? Laura Ingraham, the Fox News anchor. Princess Irene of the Netherlands. Bobby Jindal, the former governor of Louisiana. James Earl Jones. So Darth Vader is a convert to Catholicism. 2 Jedi from Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, both converts to Catholicism. Catherine, the Duchess of Kent, is the first member of the British royal family to convert to Catholicism in over 300 years. Her son also converted to Catholicism, and because he did, he lost his place in the line of succession. Of course, he was like 36th or 37th. There was no chance he was going to become king. But because of the laws of succession, that only a Protestant could be a monarch in England, he lost his place in the line of succession, and that is Lord Nicholas Windsor. Joyce Kilmer, an American journalist and poet. Shia LaBeouf, another actor, has had some controversy over the last few years, but in recent years he has converted to Catholicism. James Longstreet, Civil War Confederate general who came to be hated by the South because he became a Republican, supported the Reconstruction, and was considered a traitor, but he was a general under Ulysses S. Grant during the Battle of Gettysburg, but he converted to Catholicism. Gustav Mahler, a composer. Thomas Merton, a Trappist monk, and his monastery isn't too far from here in Kentucky. John Henry Newman, Cardinal Newman, was a convert. Of course, St. Paul, the apostle. One might say he's one of the earliest and great converts of the church. Here's another good one. Vincent Price. How many knew Vincent Price was a convert to Catholicism? Knute Rockne, the football coach. He converted from Lutheranism. William Rosencrantz, brother of Sylvester's brother, a Union Army general in the American Civil War. Sylvester Horton Rosencrantz was the first bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Columbus. So his brother, William Rosencrantz, was a Union general during the Civil War. Dutch Schultz, a mob boss. Elizabeth Ann Seton, the first native-born American canonized a saint, was herself a convert. I mentioned earlier William Tecumseh Sherman, a Civil War general. Barbara Stanwyck, another American actress. Edith Stein was a convert, and she became mother, I believe, Sister Teresa Benedicta in Germany, but because of her Jewish roots, she was born Jewish, she was arrested by the Nazis and eventually died in the extermination camps. Kateri Tekakwitha, Native American convert. Here's one. Mabel Tolkien, the mother of the English writer J.R.R. Tolkien, which means he also converted with his mother when he was a child. And then Edith Tolkien, who married J.R.R. Tolkien, converted before she married him. Evelyn Waugh, the English writer. If you've ever heard of the novel Brideshead Revisited, he's the author. John Wayne. How many knew John Wayne died a Catholic? On his deathbed he died, and he has a grandson who's actually a priest. Oscar Wilde, a writer and poet. And finally, Tennessee Williams, an American playwright. All these are examples of converts to the Catholic faith, and notable converts to the Catholic faith. People who were not cradle Catholics, but something about the church, which may very well have been lifelong cradle Catholics, that drew them to the faith. And in this, we see the continued work of evangelization in our church. And yeah, every now and again there might be some tension. Well, you haven't been Catholic as long as I have, or perhaps even in a parish. You haven't been in the parish as long as I have. At a funeral this week, I introduced Father Nunning, who has long roots here at the parish. I said his roots go way back in the parish, and I'm Father Bill Nicholas. I just got here. But the same can be said for the roots that we have in our Catholic faith. But when we have parables like this, it speaks not only to the work of evangelization that the church has, but that people will convert at different times of their lives, sometimes as children, sometimes as teenagers, young adults, sometimes even on their deathbed. But the purpose of that evangelization is fulfilled when people are brought into that vineyard, and all of us receive the same reward, the same grace, the same eternal life that God promises us. So thank God for cradle Catholics, first and foremost, because I'm saying it out of a personal sense of patriotism, being one myself. But especially thank God for those who hear the Word of God and are drawn to it to join our faith, to join our community of faith, and to join us in the work in the vineyard that Jesus gives us all to do.